Hey y'all, this is Nolo Pada. Today I'm going to be going over an update to No Man's Sky that is unlike any other. And I know I've said that before, but this one is a mixed bag. It was a big turning point in the game's development. It added a heap of new features that are still staples of the game to this day. And I would say it's the point when No Man's Sky entered its modern age. It brought back millions of people, and sadly it also came with a bunch of bugs and issues that took months to fully fix. This mixed bag of an update was No Man's Sky Beyond. Marking the milestone of version 2.0, No Man's Sky Beyond was announced months ahead of release, March of 2019. This was one of the rare times when we had a peek behind the curtain of development. The first teaser dropped, along with a message from Hello Games. They decided, instead of releasing 3 smaller updates in 2019, they would roll them all together into a cohesive package and put a cute little bow on it. This was really when the big summer update tradition was firmly cemented. These 3 updates that they planned were No Man's Sky Online, No Man's Sky Virtual Reality, and No Man's Sky 2.0. They formed 3 pillars that were combined into this one update. And I usually go into great detail on all these features and stuff that are added in these updates, but for brevity's sake, I'm going to be doing a general overview of the major features only. This update truly was the biggest so far, and it would take me at least an hour to describe everything fully, so keep that in mind. The first was No Man's Sky Online. Beyond overhauled how multiplayer worked in No Man's Sky. No longer did you have to squad up with someone you know, hit the join random player button. The space anomaly went from being a story related location to a huge sprawling space station where you could call it to your location at any time. Imagine the anomaly as a lobby. Outside of time and space, no matter where you are in the universe, you meet up with up to 16 other players here. You see their ships, you could squad up with them, and you could even send them a friend request. At the center of this anomaly was the Nexus, a new terminal. Here's where you could do co-op missions that earn you a new currency, Quicksilver. No, not that Quicksilver. I mean, technically this isn't the first time we got Quicksilver. Back in the next days, there were the original community missions that had storylines and they gave you Quicksilver. But this is the first time we had a permanent way of getting Quicksilver. This is an in-game money where you could buy appearances, decorations for your bases, and so much more. This Nexus sadly replaced the older co-op mission terminal that we had on our freighters from the next days, the Galactic Commission Station. Rest in peace. Within the anomaly were also a bunch of new NPCs. Some traded items or discovery data for nanites. Another one of them was like Gordon Ramsay that judged your food.
And you surprise me to how shit you are.
And others were just chilling. Just don't trust. A lot of these new NPCs were also vendors of technology blueprints, now more organized than ever. Gone were the days of having to grind through factories on planets to learn blueprints that you already knew.
Bruh.
There was also this new mega teleporter that not only had your regular destinations on it, you could also now visit the bases of players on the anomaly. Little side note, I don't ever remember this working well ever. I think it depends on whether the player is still in the anomaly or they left, but I have spotty results trying to warp into people's faces. I'd say about 30% of the time it just fails to download, so there's that. Additionally, Hello Games would feature 3 bases made by members of the community. Hello Games, please update this list more often, so we sometimes go months without any new featured bases. There's so much talent in this community making beautiful bases. Even if you have to make like a list that you cycle through every few weeks, I would still be happy with that. It's just, I feel like there's a bunch of wasted potential with these community spotlights. And in the rest of the universe, outside of the anomaly, the max player count per session went from 4 to 8 on console, and it went up to 32 on PC. Later updates would raise this even further. Ambient multiplayer, the kind of random encounters with people exploring the galaxy. Even though it's rare, I find it awesome that Hello Games expanded this kind of multiplayer. We had the Atlas Rises style of floating ball multiplayer. You know, you could see someone and they're just an orb of energy. But we now finally had full character models even for people that we're not in a squad with. Heck, you could even squad up with them if you wanted to. One of the more underrated features of Beyond, if you ask me. And the next major pillar is No Man's Sky VR. The mad lads at Hello Games made their whole game playable in virtual reality, both on PlayStation VR and on PC. Not a separate smaller experience, mind you. Some AAA games have a smaller game that's VR, but you can't play the actual full game in VR. This is the full game, down to custom interfaces. You could like reach for your multi-tool on your back, you can press the physical buttons, and you could fly your ship with a virtual joystick. This shit is wild to me, I'm not gonna lie. You can play with non-VR players, you can play regular No Man's Sky on that same save if you're tired of having your mind blown. It's nuts. To this day, it's a flagship VR title, and soon we're gonna be having the PSVR 2 version, and I'm gonna be super hyped to not play it since I'm broke right now. The amount of work that went into this implementation of VR for what seems to be not a huge amount of sales just shows me that this is something that the team felt natural for this sort of game. You can get lost in this universe, fully immersed, head tracking, hand tracking, the works. I think it was like a passion project for them to make this work, and it paid off so well. I must confess, the only reason I'm not going to speak further on the VR version is because I have yet to play No Man's Sky in virtual reality. But I still think the addition of virtual reality is incredible, and I can't wait to pick up a used PSVR in 30 years when I can finally afford it. If you want to help out with that, I do have a website where I sell some shirts. Please check it out. And now the final pillar is what the developers called No Man's Sky 2.0. Yes, the whole update is 2.0, but this is what would have been 2.0 if the 3 pillars had been released separately. I'd say this is where the meat of this update lies. I'm going to be brief with most of these features because it's a lot to go over. Firstly, missions and tutorials were revamped again, making the early game more accessible for new players. There was better guidance on how to craft, navigate, and complete complex missions. The Atlas, Artemis, and Space Anomaly stories were weaved together with new story content. The catalogs, you could now pin items to know how to craft them, or in case of materials, how to find them. It took me forever to know that this can actually even send you to other star systems to find some materials. Super underrated feature, and not a lot of people know about it. Blueprints and crafting recipes are now part of tech trees, like I mentioned earlier in the anomaly, sold by the new NPCs. Said trees are also present in the factories that used to just give random blueprints. Many new base parts were added, and they also are arranged into separate tech trees, accessible through the construction research unit on world, as well as the terminal in the anomaly. Freighter tech trees are accessible from your freighter bridge. Sentinels are now more chill overall with you mining on a planet, and on most planets they will not attack you instantly when you just start mining one pebble.
Sir, if you have a complaint, I suggest you submit it through our email system. I would be happy to refer you to our website.
You are done. Fire.
And the mining beam now mines faster the hotter you get it, which is a cool, interesting feature, but at the same time, I wish it would have balanced this with the fact that when you upgrade your mining beam, it takes longer for it to get hotter, so you don't get this benefit if you upgrade your mining laser. It's contradictory. Starship controls and combat were once again improved. To this day, I'd say dogfighting in No Man's Sky still needs a revamp. It's just not satisfying to me. That's just my personal opinion. Credit where it's due. After Beyond, they did make combat more difficult, but I wish it was more engaging. I wish we had like the miniguns that we have in Elite Dangerous. I haven't played that game in like years, but Elite Dangerous combat is just so satisfying, and I wish No Man's Sky had a bit of that in it. Not saying it has to be like Elite Dangerous in combat, but I wish it was more deep. Inventory UI was improved, and inventory slots can now hold huge amounts of mined materials. 9,999 to be exact. My perfectionist mind still asks me, why not 10,000? The world will never know. Countless quality of life fixes were added, and some were actually great. For example, being able to craft and repair technology piece by piece instead of needing to have all the materials at once. Back in these days, you had a small inventory most of the time, so needing to have all the crafting materials at once was a pain. So this was a godsend, I'll tell you that. We now had new warp hypercores. Is it weird that I missed the old icon? We had launch thrusters that had solar panels on them so they could charge. One of my favorite features though is a new and improved discovery page, where you can now see each of the planets in the systems that you go to. You can see more intuitive lists and tabs for the creatures, rocks, plants, and new procedural flavor text for all your discoveries, you name it. I do miss seeing them goofy ass running animations, not gonna lie. But I prefer this polished screen way more than that old pre-Beyond discovery menu. Beyond also added planetary charts, which I think is just a way better method than the old way of having to plop down beacons and track stuff down. Just buy the maps you need and you're directed to what you seek. Sometimes. I mean, you still sometimes have to use more than one map to find a crash ship because you'll end up just finding crash freighters or abandoned buildings. There's still some RNG to this, but there are methods that I will discuss in future videos of how to get what you want to find from these charts. The Galaxy Map UI was refreshed, love to see it. Many new dialogues and encounters were added to the NPCs that you could find in the buildings on planets. Many existing dialogues were revisited and enhanced, according to them. I still feel like they removed some of the interactions because when I first played this game, I remember many plot lines that I do not see in the game anymore. Maybe I'm wrong, please someone prove me wrong. Along with these new interactions came better NPC animations. No longer will they just blankly stare at you while telling you like some sad story about their life and their family. They're gonna actually emote while interacting with you. Speaking of NPCs, they're no longer glued to their chairs and to the floor. Sean brought some paint thinner and just removed that glue so they could walk freely. I would praise this addition, but it's kind of like the bare minimum in this industry to have walking NPCs, so I'll move on. Alien languages have way more words, and it's now easier to learn them as you could speak to NPCs and ask for help. You can now tame and ride creatures. Best feature ever. Okay, I'm joking. Although it doesn't add much to the overall gameplay loop, I'm still glad that we're able to ride the wacky and wonderful creatures that we find. And it's also a good way to traverse planets. If you need to go AFK, you don't have to hold the forward button or joystick forward. You just let these animals be and they'll walk in a pretty straight line to wherever you want. They also added a variety of baits that you have to learn which critter needs which kind of bait, and they would give you the bonus resources that they would give according to these baits. But sadly, in a future update, they just removed this variety. Now all the animals eat just plain bait. Don't ask me why, it's just a dumbing down of a feature for no apparent reason. I kinda miss it, but what can you do? Here's another feature that doesn't really connect to the rest of the game in any way, but I wish it did. Cooking. Yes, you heard me right, cooking. In this space game, you can just put on your little apron and start baking pies or cakes or whatever you want. You can make mystery meat stew. With all these new creature products and new fruits and vegetables, we have plenty of ingredients to work with. There's many layers of recipes and ingredients, and I think it's pretty dope. It just needs a reason to exist. Even if they added a cooking minigame where you slice onions or something, anything. Because just throwing shit together in a space oven is just like refining with a different coat of paint. And for the love of all that is holy, Hello Games, please let Cronus judge stacks of food instead of one by one. I'm not going through that humiliation of him shit talking my food over and over for just a handful of nanites. It takes way too long for the amount of nanites that you get. It should be a more streamlined process. This needs a revamp. Although these foods do give small buffs and charge your suit's tech, a 10-second jetpack boost ain't worth cooking a whole ass meal. The buffs need to be more powerful, or they need to have like 5 or 10 minutes, because I'm not cooking all that. I'm not cooking that to just be able to run a little faster for like 20 seconds or use my jetpack unlimited for 10 seconds. I mean, come on. I feel like the food part of the game has been neglected ever since. I feel like it could use a lot of improvement and it could actually be a fun part of the game. I did mention more base parts earlier, but a big part of that was the new industrial system. You can now set up power generators that don't need fuel. You can set up mining operations with big storage silos. And these would mine even when you turned off the game. And up until recently, you could pretty much print unlimited money with activated indium mining. RIP to all those mines. They also added a build camera here, which is a great feature. You used to not be able to even jetpack when you were building, which was all fixed with this update, allowing for more verticality. They added sensors, switches, logic gates. You can make incredibly complex builds and machines, which, to be honest, I don't mess around with much. If I wanted to mess around with those kinds of things, I would rather play Factorio, I'm not gonna lie. Give me a second, let me boot up Factorio real quick.
Many hours later.
I may have gone too far in a few places.
That might explain why I went so long without posting a video. Ships were not only made larger to make them look less like toys, it also helped because in virtual reality, scale is just way more obvious, and it was a must. The ships are now more life-sized, and they have more detailed and textured models. And even the interiors were given a makeover, which is beautiful. There was now an in-game joystick that VR players could grab and control their ship. It's great stuff. It's really nice to see all the little lights and screens, and it's nice. Along with this, the game was optimized to run smoother on lower spec computers, which is great. But this lets me segue into the biggest drawback of Beyond: the bugs. The Beyond update was not the most stable update this game has had. It had hundreds of issues and dozens of major bugs that would make the game crash, freeze, the audio would lag and stutter sometimes. Thankfully, I didn't run into too many of these, but at the same time, a lot of these bugs made me stop playing until they were fixed. And thankfully, they were fixed with many small patches and fixes, and with subsequent smaller updates, they were also ironed out. And I get it, game development is difficult, especially with a small team like Hello Games, and we usually expect bugs with these major summer updates, but Beyond was next level of infamy. Thankfully, by around the next update, Synthesis, things were much better, and all of those great new features had their moments to shine. All in all, this update was a mixed bag due to these bugs, not gonna lie. And if it was without bugs, I'd probably say it was one of the greatest updates it's ever had. But those issues really knock it down a few points for me personally. Wait, hold up. Looks like there's a major feature I forgot to mention in here. You can now sit on chairs. I take back what I said, this is the best update of all time.